This podcast is brought to you by the Dunfield Retirement Residence, a casually elegant retirement community located at Yonge and Eglinton in the heart of Midtown Toronto. Customized living options complement your independent, active lifestyle. Learn more at thedunfield.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We're the Menschwarmers, your bi-weekly look at the world of Jews and sports. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
It's World Cup week. I'm doing great. How bad could I be? We've got soccer's biggest event, the biggest event in soccer, starting in 3 days, and we're here to talk to you about all of the Jews involved.
This is the first international competition that seems like normal in terms of COVID. And it's one that's very abnormal in every other way.
Yes, because it's happening in a country that, well, for our purposes, up until very recently, did not allow Jews entry.
Well, Israelis at least. I mean, I think you could if you didn't have an Israeli stamp on your passport.
That's true. Although that's changed recently. That said, it's happening in November. There was some serious ethical issues involved in the event itself, which we'll get into in a little bit. But beyond that, it is the world comes to Qatar.
Sure.
For a large scale event for the World Cup.
So before we dive into that, I think that'll be the main thrust of our episode, talking some World Cup and
the middle Megillah.
For our 3 or 4 UK listeners, football news. Let's talk a little bit about just what's been going on the last few weeks. I think the big story that we want to just touch on.
European football. It's European football.
European football. They just call it football in Europe.
Wow.
Yeah. The subject we focused most of our last episode on was, of course, the Kyrie Irving anti-Semitism scandal. There really hasn't been that much news per se since then. I mean, he did apologize. We should say that as we're taping this, he has not been returned to his team. He was suspended for 5 games. I think it's now been 7 games, and he's going to miss an 8th because they're on a road trip. The latest news this morning was Adrian Wojnarowski, the consummate NBA insider, said that
he was told Jewish.
He is not Jewish.
Woj is not Jewish?
No.
You've blown my mind, man. I'm gonna say that's a Mike Jacobs All-Star of the media set.
Anyways, non-Jewish NBA commentator Adrian Wojnarowski tweeted this morning that he was told Kyrie has made progress, whatever that means. There was a checklist that they had given him of a number of things that he was supposed to do, including donating to anti-hate causes, undergoing training for anti-Semitism, and meeting with the ADL and Jewish leaders. I have no idea if he's done any of the specific parts of it.
I feel like coming back from an anti-Semitism scandal isn't necessarily a thing you can checklist your way out of.
Yeah, I know. It's all just sort of vibes.
Qualitative than that.
It's all just sort of vibes at this point. You know what I mean? And I've heard from people where they've said to me like the most disconcerting or like saddening part of all this is like the lack of condemnation, and from other NBA players or from teammates.
There were plenty of former like Shaq and Kareem had plenty to say.
And I think that's something we focused on the last time as well. It's just like, it is a bit disappointing. And like, I was listening to a podcast with Bomani Jones the other day, the Defectors podcast with him. And he was saying like, if you're from New York, like these guys are not a threat. Like they like stand outside of the, arenas dressed like Parliament Funkadelic and like hand out flyers to people. Like they're not like an active threat to Jews. And I agree, like the Black Hebrew Israelites, like they're pretty low down on the list, which is something.
So that's not actually true. Because in Hoboken about 3 years ago, a Black Hebrew Israelite killed a whole bunch of people.
I agree. It's not that there isn't an influence that has had anti-Semitic, hate crimes as part of it. I'm just saying that the majority of Black Hebrew Israelites are not like an active threat. But I'm saying that's why I'm saying like the whole thing is not the issue itself. It's just the vibes on this. And like, of course, we went over this last time. The video had, Ford's The International Jew reprinted, protocols type stuff. It had Holocaust now. It had all these things that are like, if not
incorrectly spelled Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. If not outright hate crimes themselves, then certainly have led people to hate crimes. I just feel like it's not that's not really the relevant part at this point. The point is just like Kyrie needs to atone to a certain degree in order to make people feel comfortable. And like, I guess he still has not done so.
What if he
that was
fasts for 24 hours? If he goes through a 24-hour fast, no water, has to stand for all of Kol Nidre, is he forgiven?
Well, he's got another 8 months until he can do that. 8-9 months.
It's the way we atone.
That's true. Look, I don't think he needs to, like, I don't know, be forced into something that's uncomfortable for him. But like, what he refused to do is just sort of do the bare minimum until it was too late. So now it's like, hey, that bare minimum of just saying like, I didn't watch this movie and I apologize for any anti-Semitic tropes it, contained and or outright anti-Semitism it contained. But he didn't do that in the moment. Now it's just like, well, it's a little too late now.
Yeah, weird. It's impossible for it to feel sincere at this point.
Yeah,
like, there isn't anything you could say or do that is like, you know what? He gets it.
Yeah. So I think it'll either be a few more games and like we just go on with it and we move on to something else, or what people were feeling last week or the last 2 weeks was just sort of like maybe he's out of the NBA / off the Brooklyn Nets, and that might still be the case. I guess.
Will he ever be able to play in Brooklyn without being booed? Like, if
that is a good question.
He's going to be booed in Toronto. He's going to be booed in New York, probably Miami, probably LA. He might get some cheers, like some, solidarity cheers in like Salt Lake City or Oklahoma. But
I don't know about that. I think maybe he needs to resurface somewhere where there are fewer Jewish fans
and fewer evangelicals too.
Yeah, I think that everything that can be said about it has been said. We'll continue to monitor it, but it's just sort of like old news at this point, and we'll see what happens with Kyrie. But I guess I'm just sort of like done thinking about it that much, because like it's not like we're getting any better answers or better feelings about this, or like his some sort of something else coming to the surface that makes you understand it more. It's just sort of like, all right, this guy is out there in all kinds of different ways, and this time it took a very anti-Semitic vibe, and I guess it's just been a sort of sad litmus test for the NBA, because you haven't had people coming out in support of Jews the way they have. Players certainly, at least, haven't come out in support of Jews the way they have for other causes.
I think that's sort of also, we talked about, there's sort of a low expectations thing here that a lot of people give to Kyrie. I think that if you're a well-known conspiracy theorist, the surprise is when you don't think the Jews are behind it. Everyone, Kyrie included, has a Jewish billionaire particular that they think controls the world. Some people call him George Soros. Other people call him Baron de Rothschild. Other people call him Sheldon Adelson. And like, no matter who you are, if you're not Jewish, there is some evil Jewish billionaire to you. So if you're a conspiracy theorist, it's only a matter of time before you get to which it's like a good BuzzFeed quiz. Which Jewish billionaire do you think controls the world?
Yeah, it's a good point. I do think that is sort of like the end game for any conspiracy theory / like conspiratorial thinking about the world. Like it never comes down to like, and the people responsible for it are the Episcopalians, It's just, it never is that. It always, eventually it just get around to being the Jews.
Maybe Kyrie will figure out that the earth is flat because of the Jews. It used to be round, and now the Jews are the ones that have made it flat. We flattened it.
If that's what gets him on our side.
It unleavened. It had to unleaven because in 18 minutes only could we shape the world to get away from the anti-Semitic planet. So Earth had to become unleavened in the biblical times.
Okay. I think these metaphors have been sufficiently beaten as the dead horses they are. Let's move on to some other Jewish sports news. I think we should say, a hearty mazel tov to Alex Bregman.
World Series MVP? No, World Series champion.
Yeah. He did not World Series champion for the second time. Didn't win the MVP, but contributed certainly to their triumph over the Philadelphia Phillies. So we wish him well on that. Definitely wasn't rooting for the Astros, but whatever, good for them. They won. This one feels cleaner, I guess, in some ways. And I guess we can hold our breath for news about Bregman playing for Israel in the World Baseball Classic. I think it's probably unlikely, because I think we would have heard something by now.
We'll ask him. If we get a hold of him, we'll ask him.
Yeah.
We'll ask him why not.
I think he has said for now that he intends to sit it out. So that's probably just getting a little older. He has kids, recovering from injury type thing. But you never know. I guess he could change his mind.
Interestingly, as we heard from Jonathan Mayo, I guess several years ago, talking about Team Israel, he was a qualification player on the Team Israel 2017 cycle because he hadn't made the majors yet.
Yeah,
and he only missed that tournament because he got called up.
And I think he did play for the U.S. in the last one. But, there's no reason why he couldn't change that change that around. So anyways, we'll see. I should say that there was some other Jewish baseball news, which is that Toronto Blue Jays prospect Spencer Horwitz was added to the 40-man roster. Spencer is like a real like depth guy. He was picked in the 24th round a few years ago. He's from Maryland, and he, was a college baseball player, so a little bit older than most prospects. But he was added to the 40-man roster, I think, in a sort of surprise move. It doesn't mean that he'll be on the 26-man like major league roster at the beginning of the season or anything like that. But part of it's to protect him from being selected in the Rule 5 draft. And I got to say, like, I don't even know all the intricacies of how that works, but that is sort of the reason for it. And it just means that the Jays value him. They don't want to lose enough that they don't want to lose him. And I think
I feel like that's kind of the worst way for a Jewish player to make the team is not through a legal requirement or a technicality. Is right. That, with all due respect to Spencer, but is that sort of the like major league way of your parents calling and asking for more playing time?
Look, I don't think it is. Baseball has a lot of weird things, and you have minor league rosters that are certainly in the hundreds of 100 plus players that you have to manage. So there's different machinations that go on. Often guys get to a point where it's sort of like you gotta make the majors or you gotta go home. So like, Horwitz is 25 years old. And I think, he just turned 25 years old. That's sort of like the edge of prospects, right? Like once you turn 25, I think you're no longer considered a prospect. At least, like, I know that's the way Fangraphs does it.
Is there a Yiddish phrase for shit or get off the pot?
there must be.
There must be. And sort of that's where he's at in his career. No disrespect to him, but the Blue Jays have to do that with him.
Yeah.
It's the Jays who have to shit or get off the pot.
He hit well last year, especially in AA. He hit 297. Like, he was among the Eastern League leaders. Again, not something that would be unexpected given his age, but let's see how he does in the bigs. I think he's mostly a first baseman, so I don't know how much playing time there is necessarily there for the Blue Jays, but we'll see. I think for local Jays fans, he's the first Jew we've had on the team since Rowdy Tellez. For a Jays team that's had a number of Jews in the last few years between Rowdy and Kevin Pillar and Danny Valencia. And
Pillar, who will be at the World Baseball Classic, playing for Team Israel, as will Rowdy. However, Rowdy is playing for Team Mexico.
Right.
Which is interesting in that he had 3 countries to choose from, 2 of which he has never lived in. So I'm happy that he was able to choose, the one he was happy with, which is Mexico, which is another important part of his heritage. But we're sad to miss him on Team Israel, obviously.
Yeah.
He's a beefy boy chick.
So keep out for Spencer, especially, our local Blue Jays fans. Obviously, the last season ended sadly, but he might be a bright light in the next season. Unexpected gem, 24th round prospect. So
his light was only expected to burn for 1 minor league season. Yet so far it has burned for 6 or 7, and maybe he'll get an 8th. He's the Hanukkah of Jewish baseball players, Spencer Horwitz. Horwitz, no double O, just Horwitz.
Yeah. And we should say that other slightly Jewish sounding Blue Jays prospect, Ricky Tiedemann, is not Jewish. So.
It's a double N Tiedemann. I feel like there's a small line there between Holocaust victim and perpetrator that's defined by that second N.
Also his first name is Tariq, which I think is also a giveaway that he's not it's Ricky. He goes by Ricky.
It's Ricky, but it's Tariq. There's got to be Jewish Tariq somewhere.
Maybe not since the 50s and the expulsion of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa.
Yeah, if like the last sort of Turkish or Iranian Jews, back when that was a little more popular, you'd see a lot more of them, I'm sure. Yeah. But yeah, Tariq, it's Ricky isn't Tariq. I found out recently it's not, but that Tony Finau, the golfer, short for Milton.
Weird.
So you don't think about the non-traditional short form names. So I'm happy for them. I'm happy for anyone who can pull that off.
Any other Jewish sports news you wanted to talk about before we got into the World Cup?
The F1 season is coming to an end. We actually saw a couple of Jewish drivers in a race. Lance Stroll got points in the last race, but sort of an F1 prospect for Ferrari who competes under an Israeli flag because his Israeli family is Jewish. But he was raised in Russia, races under the Israeli flag because the Russian flag has been banned from international sports. Robert Schwartzman, or Robert Mikhailovich Schwartzman, is a Russian-Israeli who's a junior for Ferrari, won a minor league a couple of years ago and actually got an F1 shot to drive a car in a practice session. So there could be a second Jew in F1 after Lance Stroll, who's putting together the end of a disappointing but okay season for Lance. But Robert Schwartzman and him shared a track. 2 Jews on the track. You don't see that often.
Cool. The only other thing I wanted to mention was just that Deni Avdija, the Israeli basketball player who's playing for the Washington Wizards, has had a few really good games recently. Most recently on last Sunday, the last game he played against Memphis. He scored 21 points. He hit 4 threes, 5 assists, 50% shooting. He had 2 games before that, 13 and 12. Points in those 2 games. His minutes in those games were over 30 per game. He seems to be getting a shot and maybe putting it together. So this is like a thing to keep track of. I mean, Deni has been, I don't want to say a disappointment. That's not really fair to him, but he's a 3rd-year player who hasn't really hit it big yet. He hasn't had like the big jump yet. He still hasn't quite made that jump, but he started most of the games for the Wizards this year, who are surprisingly, having an above 500 year and have won a few games in a row now. So keep an eye out. Maybe he's turning the corner. Maybe he's putting it together. Obviously, this is something that'd be very interesting and cool to see. He's 21 years old.
It's only 21. So
he's going to turn 22 next year. But like
he's
this is
closer to his bar mitzvah than his bar mitzvah was to when he was born. That's how young he is.
Yes, he's under 26.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So yes, he has a shot at maybe putting it together. Anyways, why don't we take a quick break and come back with some World Cup talk?
World Cup discussion.
Did you know April 2023 is Israel's 75th anniversary? In honor of this huge milestone, UJA Federation of Greater Toronto is planning an epic trip to Israel, and all of Canada is invited. Israel's anniversary, Yom HaAtzmaut, is a one-of-a-kind experience. Streets are filled with parties, fireworks, music, and dancing. On UJA's Israel 75, you'll get to join the celebration. 75 is not a regular anniversary, and Israel 75 is not your typical trip. You'll get a truly unique experience of the country, no matter how many times you've been before. With 10 specialized tracks, you can create an itinerary that is totally personalized, whether you're a foodie, an adrenaline seeker, a TV buff, or politically minded. The best part? You can mix and match tracks on different days. Embark on a thrilling adventure one day and a culinary experience the next. Let your own interests be your guide and experience everything Israel has to offer. To learn more about the trip, visit ujaisrael75.com. That's ujaisrael75.com.
Hi, I'm Meredith Shiner, and I'm the host of a new podcast from Tablet Studios called The Franchise: Jews, Sports, and America. In this limited series, I'll be talking to journalists, athletes, professional sports nerds, and more about the intersections of contemporary Jewish American life and sports culture. This show tackles the big questions like, do we still need Sandy Koufax as our icon? And are the Mets the most Jewish team in sports? And are sports just? But really, it's a show that uses sports as the prism to explore the most pressing issues for American Jews today, from identity to justice to assimilation or lack thereof. The show is serious and fun and serious fun, and I hope you'll listen to The Franchise wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, the World Cup's here. Soccer's biggest event. Every 4 and I guess then some years, we're back in the World Cup. It's a strange November World Cup. We're in Qatar, however you want to pronounce it. And this is sort of a World Cup with not a lot of Jewish players. We know of one who's currently in the World Cup, DeAndre Yedlin, who I think is his second World Cup for Team USA. Currently plays in North America after having a good career in the Premier League. But beyond him, there isn't many more. There's some Jewish broadcasters, some Jewish coaches, but there's a really interesting Jewish history to this World Cup, James. Okay. And that starts with a guy named Chuck Blazer. Does the name mean anything to you?
No, who's that?
So Chuck Blazer was an American FIFA sort of executive of CONCACAF and FIFA. He died in 2017, but he sort of had a very big role in bringing the World Cup to Qatar, and it's not a good one. So I guess I'll start at the beginning. Chuck Blazer, he is a Jewish kid from Queens, went to Forest Hills High School, NYU, did his MBA, went to business school, was sort of like a New York marketing hustler guy. And he started as like a coach and an administrator of like local youth queens soccer leagues. But he sort of had a talent for soccer organizations. So he worked his way up all throughout, up until the mid 80s, into being in charge of the U.S. Soccer Federation. He was sort of in charge of the U.S. men's soccer team. He sort of brought U.S. men's soccer to sort of the heyday as it is now. He was instrumental in bringing the World Cup in 1994 to America. As well, he was on part of the team that he created the U.S. women's soccer team, which didn't exist until he was in charge of the Soccer Federation. So he sort of has a really, really, really big impact on American soccer for a very long time. And then it was, I guess, in 1996, right after the success of the American World Cup team, World Cup hosting, that he joined FIFA. So in 2009, we're getting here. They're about to reward the 2022 World Cup. They reward the 2018 one to Russia, the 2020 World Cup. It is likely going to be in America. And then all of a sudden, sort of out of nowhere, Qatar gets awarded the World Cup. We all know that Sepp Blatter who was the president of FIFA at the time, was a pretty sketchy dude. He's been investigated for all sorts of financial crimes. As well as various other investigations. So Blazer is on the FIFA committee, and there's sort of a sketchy thing about why didn't America get the World Cup in 2020, but somehow they get it in somehow in 2022, is that the year now? In 2022, they get awarded the World Cup. It's happening now. So Chuck Blazer starts an investigation into his FIFA colleagues, who then immediately decide to fire him. So Blazer was then fired by FIFA, questioned by the ethics committee, and at the same time, he sort of gets the finger pointed. So in starting an investigation for taking the World Cup away from America and into Qatar, the FIFA sort of turns their efforts on him, and it's revealed that for the last 15 years or so, when he was in charge of the CONCACAF Soccer Federation, and part of this, he worked without a job and had been given $15 million in under-the-table cash from FIFA for various reasons during his time there. It's not over. So, in revenge, Chuck Blazer goes to the FBI and has the president of the Asian Football Federation, a guy named Mohammed bin Hammam, who I believe is Qatari. He is Qatari. And he works with the FBI to prove that the 2022 World Cup was delivered to Qatar through bribery from the Asian Football Confederation, Mohammed bin Hammam, thanks to Chuck Blazer's whistleblowing in triple agencies and back and forth, sort of pointing at each other for money laundering. So to get it short, Chuck Blazer stole a bunch of money, decided to investigate someone else for stealing a bunch of money. They then tried to investigate him, and then he had the upper hand by getting that person arrested and then immediately dying after he pled guilty.
So it seems like the only real Jewish internationalist conspiracy theory is just to get Qatar the World Cup and or screw with other international soccer stuff.
It's an interesting story because, ultimately, Blazer is sort of a representative of the history and type of corruption you see in international soccer. Yet he also is the one who blew the whistle to do it while pleading guilty. So, even though there aren't a lot of Jews in this World Cup, you can almost say that it is both a Jewish reason why the World Cup is in Qatar and why it probably won't be in Qatar again.
This is good. This is good that we're highlighting a bad Jew here. Who did some bad things, like a bad Jew in sports. Can't just focus on the good. We gotta do warts and all. So that's an interesting place to start. I mean, it does seem very, like I was saying before, this is like a normal feeling sporting event in terms of like COVID for the first time in a while, but very weird feeling otherwise. I should mention that there was a good article on Forward posted earlier today, written by Dan Friedman. Just the other day, written by Dan Friedman, just saying Jews should boycott the World Cup, and everybody else should too. But here's the Jewish reason why you should boycott it. And I feel like that's like there's nothing wrong with this article. Like it's perfectly well written in terms of like what you would expect it to say about the reasons why we should be boycotting the World Cup. But it is an interesting genre of Jewish culture writing that I feel like has propped up, which is like it's sort of like a base rate fallacy where it's like everyone should be doing this. Here's our Jewish angle on it, and it's like I don't know that there are specifically Jewish reasons to boycott the World Cup. I mean, aside from it being Qatar, and I guess you could talk about Qatar's history of treatment of Jews and stuff like that.
I don't think it was that good, their treatment.
Yeah, okay, sure. But like, its lack of relationship with Israel, again, not unique in the Arab world. And it does have a relationship now, I guess. But anyways, the point is, there are reasons why the World Cup should be boycotted by all. I think those moral reasons maybe hang on Jews more seriously than other people. Is that a fair way to put it? I mean, we've talked about this in terms of the Olympics before.
There's, certainly we've talked about the Olympics and lots of people. I also think that, like, this is going to be a somewhat sensitive thing to say, but I think the concept of like forced labor in the Middle East in bondage for the entertainment of the wealthy is a thing that Jewish people have a number of holidays and commemorations, specifically swearing it wouldn't happen again.
No, that's a very good point. And I think, like, again, like, that's a good reason, but it is also a good reason that, like, anyone should not be in favor of Qatar's World Cup. There was essentially forced labor and terrible labor standards and practices that led to the death of many people.
More people died during the construction of the Qatari World Cup stadiums than died on September 11th.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, the whole thing is like a shame. And I feel like I've said this every Olympics that we've talked about as well, where it's just sort of like, at the end of the day, like, I care about the people who are participating in it, and like, I care for them, and like all the people who care about it as well, that like, I can't stay away. Like, I know I'm going to watch, like, it's very high quality soccer. Again, a sport I don't really care that much about. Like, I watch the World Cup, I watch the Euros, I'll watch Canada qualifying. Like, I'll watch TFC when they're doing well. And again, here and there, but it's just such an event that it's like, I can't look away, even if I know I should, even if I know from an ethical standpoint I should. I just can't. Maybe that's an unethical thing to do. I don't disagree with any of the arguments that Dan Friedman made in that article, or that other people have made about Qatar and why we should, and why everyone should boycott. I personally, I can't do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you also wonder, like, were we going to watch it when it was Russia? Were we going to watch it if it would be in America, a country that also does a lot of bad shit? It's not as like acute as it is, in Qatar in the last 4 years. But, if you're wealthy enough to host an international sporting event that is, supposed to be representative of peace and, let's call it, honest competition, if you decide to look us away from all of the slavery and the bribery, then there aren't really a lot of countries that don't have human rights abuses, especially acute ones.
It is a little different, though. This is not, some thing that happens to be going on in Qatar. This is very much
it's directly related to the World Cup.
No, and I'm saying it's the Qatari state that is making this happen. That has been the force for making all this happen.
Yep.
And it is a state that has been particularly antagonistic to Israel and anti-Semitic in other ways as well. So again, if anyone came up to me and said, "I can't believe you're watching the World Cup. I can't watch it for a second," as a Jew, I'd be like, "Yeah, I get it. I don't know. I can't look away no matter what."
I thought it was something very interesting that Louis van Gaal, who's the head of the Dutch national team, actually has a Jewish connection. As he is not Jewish, but he spent most of his career playing for Ajax. Which is sort of a good part of his career playing for Ajax. He managed Ajax for a very long time.
Which is the Jewish Dutch team.
It is the Jewish Dutch team.
Traditionally.
Traditionally. There's a number of Jewish players who have played for Ajax, sort of legends. No, I don't think any of them appeared in a World Cup for Team Netherlands. But, they had sort of a bad time in the 60s during Ajax's glory days. The Dutch weren't really particularly good. But Louis van Gaal today said that, if you are a fan of Netherlands and you want to boycott the World Cup, that is the morally correct thing to do. He said, like, if you're a fan and you want to boycott, you are right. What he said is supporters are right to boycott. What he also said was, we're hoping the team is good enough that you watch anyway, even though that the boycott is morally correct.
Well, again, we can go back and forth on this. I don't have a good answer, and I just feel like I wish I had the koach to go through with my convictions and support my ethics here.
You also wonder, in the absence of like the past cast of FIFA, the corrupt era of executives, if in the post-Blazer reckoning, that sort of thing is actually going to go away.
Right.
Is there always going to be bribery in international sport? Maybe. And like, the US and Canada, where we live in Canada, is hosting the next World Cup. It was awarded sort of after all of this controversy, but like, we're hoping that they didn't have to bribe anybody and use slave labor in order to build any of the stadiums. And I know they didn't, but like, where's the line of just enough corruption that you're okay with it, but not enough that it actually kills people in like a mass death type situation?
Sure. I mean, I this is probably too far in to get into the politics of this, but like, I'm sure that before they play a World Cup game at BMO Field in Toronto, there will be a land acknowledgement of some kind, because there often is in these large sporting events.
There is at TFC games for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's great. I think it's nice they do land acknowledgements. It doesn't change the fact that the stadium is built on I don't know if it's treaty or unceded land, but that's where that stadium is built, and that land is not being given back. I'll tell you that much. So it doesn't. Anyways, we can deal with those ethical bridges when we come to them in 4 years.
We'll discuss it on the 2026 Menschwarmers World Cup preview.
So is there any other Jewish participant in the World Cup? Aside from players, is there anyone else you want to talk about and highlight here?
Legendary broadcaster Andres Cantor, who does the Spanish language American telecast. You might know him as the man who says "Goal" and so on. He is Jewish. He is from Buenos Aires and is an Argentinian Jew. There's actually a long history of Argentinian Jewish soccer. Several of them have played on the national teams. However, most of them sort of came before the World Cup era in the mid 1930s. A lot of the heyday of Argentinian Jewish soccer is in the 10s and the 20s. I was sort of looking at all of the history of World Cup soccer players who are Jewish. There are a few. Some of them went and never played in the World Cup. Sort of a notable one for Chile, a man named Sebastian Rosenthal, who was in the 1998 sort of World Cup cycle but never made the team. They never got in the World Cup. There was Jeff Agus, who, he's Swiss born, but he was called the Goose. He is Jewish from Texas, grew up in America, was a Maccabia player, sort of like a very proud Jewish player, played at the 2002 World Cup in a number of different games, actually scored an own goal. So maybe he's the first Jewish player to score a goal in the World Cup. There are a couple of sort of a notable Soviet player from the 1982 World Cup, Leonid Buryak, who is from Odessa and sort of part of the Odessa and Ukrainian Jewish community. He played there. He has an Olympic medal as well, but there aren't a lot more. I think that's more or less it. We can, there's obviously a number of famous Dutch players who played for many, many years, but not in Ajax, but didn't play in a lot of World Cups. There is, however, one sort of in the, I think it was the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, is the only time Israel ever played in the World Cup.
Right.
They had 1 loss and 2 draws. They have never made it since and never made it before. They are probably sort of the larger set of Jewish players. And since then,
I think the Israeli team is probably going to be more Jewish than most of the other teams.
Probably the most. They actually missed out. The closest they've come so far is they missed out on the 2014 World Cup by 1 point. Right. So like very, very closely they missed it, which was too bad. So that's the closest they've been otherwise. But it's also unfortunate because due to a lot of like, I don't know, we can call it like politics or anti-Semitism or Israeli politics. Israel is actually in the European football. They compete against all of the European teams.
They have a much harder way in than if they competed with other Middle Eastern
teams who all compete in Asia. Yeah, they all compete in the Asian team, as we learned with Qatar earlier and our arrested friend here. And then lastly, we've sort of got a United States legend, played in the 98 World Cup, Jonathan Bornstein, who played for a long time for Team USA. There would have been a Russian player in the World Cup if Russia wasn't kicked out.
Right. Had they qualified, or it's unclear?
They were kicked out before the qualification cycle ended. So sort of right at the end. We talked about Leonid Buryak, but the player's name is, hang on, I had it a second ago. His name was Chayhel. Did I get that right? Oh, I've lost it. Shit. I'm sorry. I closed the page with a note on it. Michael, you're going to have to cut this out. I apologize. Hang on.
Nikita Chaikin?
Yeah. It's either Kaiken or Chaikin or something like that.
It looks like it's Chaikin.
So he's got, a number of those. So it's there aren't a lot beyond that.
Well, we should say, good luck to DeAndre Yedlin and the U.S. men's national team. It is quite an honor for him to be called onto the 2022 team. He was on the 2014 U.S. men's national team, and I think he's the only one who was on that team. Obviously, people remember that the U.S. didn't make the 2018 World Cup, but they're back, and should be a decent team. Unfortunately, Italy didn't make it. I guess Mario Balotelli, who is not Jewish, but sort of fostered and raised by a Jewish family who he considers his own.
Israel.
I don't know if Balotelli would have made the World Cup team, but he might have.
He's
a little bit past his prime.
It would have been a twist. He's a little past his prime, but it would have been fun. Would have been really, really fun. If any of you know about any other Jews who might be in the tournament, in the coaches or referee world, either, there could be a Jew referee. There's a Canadian referee who's an MLS ref named Drew Fisher. As far as we can tell, he's not Jewish, but he's Canadian and we care. And the name Andrew Fisher, I think I would call that a
Mike Jacobs All-Star.
A Mike Jacobs All-Star, Andrew Fisher.
It's close. There's enough non-Jewish Fishers. I agree. My Judar is always tingling when I see Fisher, but it's not
it's
not
true.
Always activated. There's enough non-Jewish Fishers too.
There are enough non-Jewish Fishers, but there are also some. So you never really know, but we'd love to hear more if we can. There's an Istvan Kovacs, who's also a UEFA referee. Kovacs, I feel like Hungarians, you get a lot of up and down. Kovacs could be his name is essentially Stephen Kovacs, which you could also think could be Sandy Koufax. So there might be a Hungarian football referee whose name is kind of Sandy Koufax, Istvan Kovacs at the 2022 World Cup. But that's sort of as Jewish as we can get it, starting with Chuck Blazer and ending with DeAndre Yedlin. From B to Y, that's almost a full alphabet.
Right. It's not bad. Well, we'll definitely be watching, like it or not, the World Cup and keep an eye on that. And maybe even tune into a few, was it Telemundo, I think, that he calls for?
Yes,
Telemundo
or Univision.
Games.
Is it Television?
Or Univision, okay. Either Univision or Telemundo. I don't know which ones we actually get here, but to listen to Andres Cantor make some of those legendary goal calls.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Until next time, you can follow us as always and read our pieces and download our podcast at the Canadian Jewish News website, thecjn.ca. You can follow us on Twitter until we're kicked out for impersonating Kyrie Irving, twitter.com/Menschwarmers. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. And thanks again to our producer, Michael Freeman, for putting up with us and producing the podcast.
The Dunfield Retirement Residence offers customized living options to complement your independent, active lifestyle. Welcome home. Welcome to the Dunfield. Visit us at thedunfield.com to book a personal tour.